Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. And thank you for coming this morning. It's bright and early, isn't it? Especially for some of you who have traveled. I know Martin traveled from the north side, so thank you for that. So I wanted to share with you today about how to journey from burnout to abundance. And if my slide will click. So, uh, who here has experienced burnout before or relates to that word, whether it's in your work or in, serving in church or parenting, maybe? Um, yeah. So you're not alone because actually 6 out of 10 Australians report being burnt out in the 2022 Microsoft Trend Index. We were actually winning in the global competition for burnout. So global average is 48%, but Australia was sitting at 62%. And that hasn't changed either. A recent workforce study in New South Wales actually found 66% of burnout rate out of 100 among most of the respondees. So in the last few years, you might have seen a lot of news article titles saying teachers are burnt out, childcare workers are burnt out, disability workers, even bank staff. They feel burnt out as well. Tech workers, mid-level associates, and then CEOs. We think CEOs, they have a pretty good life in the office, but actually CEOs have a higher rate of burnout compared to employees. So it's actually quite a relevant topic, and burnout and stress is literally everywhere, isn't it? Um, and what is actually burnout? Because people always use that word. And when I was a young graduate from dental school, I actually went through a stage when I felt burnt out. But someone who was older and wiser than me told me, no, it's completely normal. That's how you should feel after a few years of working. And then usually I might just change jobs or even change careers. But is that really the solution? Is that what we're really destined to do, to always be on the move and looking out for other things to do to fulfill that whole? So burnout is actually a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So I wanted to break that down a little bit. It's actually a syndrome, which is simply a collection of symptoms. It's not actually a mental health condition. And then it's caused by chronic workplace stress. But stress is actually a normal part of life, isn't it? But it's when it's not successfully managed that it becomes an issue. And it's characterized by three dimensions. So first one is exhaustion, and second one is cynicism, and third one is professional inefficacy. These sound like pretty, big words and a bit intangible. So I like to break them down usually for people in my talk. And usually you'll hear people say, I'm really fatigued or drained or tired, and I feel tired even though I've slept a lot already. And maybe you'll feel frustrated at people that normally wouldn't irritate you as much. Or sometimes people will withdraw and wouldn't want to spend as much time with other people, or they might be less productive in their work or not be as professional in what they're doing. And these are some of the things that people might say. And because it's a Christian context, I would say, sometimes people feel like serving and working can become an obligation and not a joy, and not coming from a place of gratitude. And that they're constantly exhausted, their to-do list is overwhelming, and then they just don't care anymore. And the last one is quite key, isn't it? Actually, in that 2024 workplace survey, they actually had a few quotes about people actually not caring about their job, or bosses writing that this generation, the younger people, don't care about the workplace or the staff. And care is so key because you can't pour from an empty cup. And when you aren't self-caring well, you actually can't care for others. And a lot of us here might have read the book, the 5 love languages, and that's all about learning how to care for others, but also how do you care for yourself. So I like to talk about self-care and just define it a little bit, because self-care is actually not selfish. I think a lot of people now talk about self-care, or, you hear mental health wellness talks, and it's all about, taking care of yourself. But then you might leave the rest of your team to burn out while you're off having a retreat or taking mental health leave. So actually self-care is about having self-awareness of how much you can take on, and when to say yes and when to say no. And the aim is actually to better care for your team and better care for your clients and your loved ones. So the aim of self-care is not purely selfish, but so that you have overflow so that you can care for others better. And I actually talk at a lot of healthcare conferences because I am a dentist by trade. And my topic there is often called how to practice self-care with care without burnout. Because healthcare, it's in the name, isn't it? We actually want to be caring for people, but it's not just healthcare professionals that need to self-care to care for their team or their clients better. All of us in every industry, people don't know how much we know unless they know that we care. So that's actually really what we should be doing. And that's how we can actually shine for God as well in our workplaces. And I like to usually start off by talking about why we do what we do, because when you know your why, you know your way. And here we're all faith-based business owners, and we know our why. And we actually want to glorify God and how we work, no matter what we do. It doesn't just have to be ministry, but every day, not just Sundays, we're glorifying God. And it's important to consider why you know what you're doing, because then you'll actually know which way to take. And you might look at my profile and go, oh, wow, she's got a lot of things that she's doing that's outside of dentistry. So why is this dentist standing on stage talking to us about burnout? I wanted to share a little bit about my story of why I talk about how to journey from burnout to abundance. So I grew up as the typical Asian immigrant. I don't know what your experiences with Asians are, but we're very hardworking and we fulfill all our parents' hopes and dreams. And yeah, and I grew up being actually quite a grateful child to my parents. I know they've worked very hard to move us from Taiwan, where we had to actually often practice running into the bunker as a school, hiding from earthquakes or maybe the impending wars. Yeah, moving from there to a country where there's so much freedom and an abundance of opportunities. So I responded really well by, fulfilling all of my duties, which is actually studying hard. And I became the top of my year in Brisbane Girls Grammar School. And because I'm such a goody two shoes and overachiever, I also became the top of my year in Melbourne Uni for dental school. So I spent a lot of my life actually achieving, and my definition of success was always about what is my next step? What's the next thing I should do? What can I achieve more? And a few years out from uni, I came to a point where I realized being a good family dentist, no one was going to give you another achievement award or a top mark for being a good family dentist. So what should I do then so that I can get my next achievement? So I was thinking about going back to uni and studying further. So in the previous slide, you saw I was actually starting to demonstrate at Griffith Uni to think about the academia path. And then I was also thinking about owning a practice, because those were the natural progressions that I should take as a dentist. I was also serving really heavily at church. And actually during that time, I was, now that I look back, slightly burnt out already, but I didn't pick that up. I thought that was a normal part of life and just what we should be doing as good Christians and good workers. And I never actually stopped to consider, why do I do what I do or what I actually enjoy doing, until my research supervisor in Melbourne Uni actually passed away, and he was in his mid-30s. He was found by the cleaners on a Sunday in the postgraduate room of Melbourne Uni, and he passed away from natural causes. And that was a moment where I actually stopped in my tracks and really thought about, why do I do what I do, and why do I want to go back and study more? Is it just to fulfill what I would like to achieve, or am I really passionate about it? And everyone responds differently to these sort of events occurring. But for me, I actually really stopped and thought about, oh, why am I in dentistry in the first place? And I realized when I exited from high school, I actually told all the interviewers for dental school interviews that I wanted to volunteer overseas as a short-term missionary, because I grew up in church. And dentistry is actually the most universal healthcare, because everyone's got teeth and everyone needs a dentist. Whereas if I was a heart surgeon, maybe my family and friends won't really need to see me. And, it's a very easy way to volunteer, maybe not for long-term mission trip. So you got to be careful what you pray to God about, right? Because when I was younger and I was sitting in church listening to all the missionaries. I was like, oh, yes, use me, God, but maybe not for, the long term, hardcore mission trips, just short term ones. And dentistry sounds like a great way of doing that. So I actually said, that was one of the things I'd love to do. And I had volunteered a lot locally, both in church and in dental roles, but I had never actually gone on that overseas trip. So that was actually when I wrote an email to a organization in Canada, actually, that my friends have volunteered with. So I know they're reputable and they're Christian based. And I said, I'd like to volunteer. And they immediately replied and said, you're exactly the person we've been praying for our mental health team. And I was like, I'm a dentist, right? But they were actually looking for a translator for their mental health team in China. So we were actually giving continuing education lectures to psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers in mental hospitals. And then they also had a dental team who were seeing the psych patients. So I actually fit in really well on both arms of that team. So yeah, I ended up on a trip where I was translating lectures for these psychiatrists and psychologists in mental hospitals, as well as seeing patients in orphanages and in mental hospitals. And it's really true, isn't it? What we say, that it's more blessed to give than to receive, because when you actually volunteer, especially on short-term mission trips, the volunteers actually gain a lot more than what the locals get. And when I came back, I actually realized I had a lot of transferable skills and I had a lot of different gifts and talents that I can serve God with or utilize. So I actually realized I can do much more than just the few paths that I could think of before. So I actually opened up a practice, a allied health practice with my husband at the time. And then I started doing a lot of business courses, which led to property courses. And I was always investing in property because I wanted to build up passive income. But then I started learning about how to do property development. And it was during the time when I started investing in a property development project that my ex-husband then traveled on very different paths with me, and I started to think very differently. And again, my burnout symptoms were not addressed, so I was actually just adding more to my list of things to do and looking for achievement in different ways as well. So we ended up traveling in very different paths until he no longer understood why I was doing what I was doing anymore. And he locked me up in a psychiatric hospital. And I had to call police to my house once to rescue me. And I also had to go through a long process through the mental health tribunal and the dental board to actually clear my name. And I know this sounds a little bit traumatic and a little bit stressful for people, but actually, if you think about my story, it's actually a lot to be grateful for. Sorry, my slides were a little bit mixed up there. But yeah, I have a lot to be grateful for because which other dentist would have had mental health training before they went and lived in a mental health ward? And I was actually doing quite well while I was there, which can sound a little bit strange to people, but I was actually doing quite a good job counseling other women out of suicidal ideations, because they're like, oh, your husband sounds a lot worse than mine. Maybe I don't need to kill myself. And the Logan Hospital chaplain actually came and asked me whether I wanted to do a chaplaincy course. And I went from someone who actually got these pictures from my kiddie patients. Mark, who drew that picture for me when he was in grade 2, is still seeing me now as an adult, actually. And yeah, to getting pictures from my fellow patients from art therapy. And I really knew that God had a bigger and better plan for me, even though I was going through a really hard time battling to try to clear my name. And I realized during my stay there that before, when I was volunteering in mental hospitals, I had a lot of ego, especially coming from a Western context to Eastern context, thinking that our mental health system is a lot better than theirs. And, thinking, oh, I'm such a, wonderful person to go and help other people. But when I was actually living among the patients here, first of all, yeah, our mental health system maybe has a little bit of improvement to look for as well. But also I realized a lot of people who suffer from mental health issues actually just need someone to care and just someone to listen and to actually maybe change their mindset and give them perspective on life. And actually that can resolve so many issues that wouldn't actually become diagnosable mental health conditions. And the lessons we learn the hardest, we actually teach the best. So after everything was resolved for me, I thought about how I can use my story in a positive way, actually, to help inspire others and help others, rather than taking the route of, legal actions or going on today, tonight, or things like that. Because I think prevention is better than cure. And we know that, burnout is actually an early stage of what can lead to mental health conditions or suicidal ideations, but we can actually stop it when we actually pick up some of those symptoms that we saw before, early symptoms and sign, and we can actually change our path and change our mindset. So I often share about the acronym GRACE that I like to use about changing your mindset to prevent burnout. And it's not just because it's my name, but also as a Christian, I, growing up, we always use the word grace in a way that was like, God's kindness towards sinful humans, which can be very hard for most people to understand. But I find in recent years, a lot of people who are secular actually use the word grace as well. And it's all about actually showing kindness towards others as well as kindness towards yourself. So if we want to turn to your neighbor now and quickly say something kind to each other. And now, if we want to also turn to your neighbor again and say something kind about yourself. We got a few more laughs when I said say something kind about yourselves, because actually 80% of our thoughts in our mind, which is always racing, and we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, is actually negative. And a lot of times the negative things we say is about ourselves. So we need to learn how to be kind to ourselves, because it's hard to be nice when someone is mean to you all the time. And most of that time, someone is actually yourself. And so the G in grace actually stands for gratitude. To be grateful for everyone and everything in your life, even the tough circumstances and the challenges that you have managed to overcome. So I don't know if we have time to very quickly just share maybe one thing that you're grateful for today, with your neighbor as well, or people on your table. You go. People at the front are doing more than one, doing a very good job there. Because gratitude can actually change common days into Thanksgiving and turn routine jobs into joy and ordinary opportunities into blessings. So we want to actually live with an attitude of gratitude. And R is for rest and recharge. Sometimes we actually need to learn how to rest, not just actually rest by sleeping, but think about what recharges us, and who we're spending time with, and what activities are we doing that actually fills our cup. Because if you don't do that, sometimes God will put a spanner in the works and actually force you to rest and recharge, which I got to do in a retreat in the mental hospital, where you don't have phone technology and people cook 5 meals a day for you, right? So people pay good money for these retreats. Um, so, and then A is for acceptance, actually accepting the things that you can't change, and actually having the wisdom to know what you can change and what you can't change, and having the courage to change what you can. A lot of time people speak about acceptance, but acceptance is not just passively waiting for the world to, go by. Or you might have heard of that story where someone was standing on the roof waiting for God to save them passively, but God might have sent a helicopter or a boat by, and you actually have to take that step. So we actually need to think about what we can change and whether we have the courage to actually make those changes as well. And C is for compassion, to be compassionate towards other people. We're very good at doing that as Christians, I believe, but also being compassionate towards yourself as well. And E is for encouragement. We want to be like Paul and be able to actually mentor other people and encourage other people with our experiences. But we also want to be encouraged by other people as well and have someone to walk alongside with. So when I actually got discharged from the mental health ward, over the car park there was actually a beautiful rainbow, and I actually remember this Bible verse from Jeremiah where God said that he's got plans for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me, plans to give you a hope and a future. And we know that our thoughts are not God's thoughts, and God's way is higher than our ways. And sometimes what we have planned for our future, or what we have vision boarded, what the world tells us to do, might not actually be God's way. In fact, he might have an even better way that we cannot imagine. So never did I imagine that I'd be speaking on stage. If you asked me 5 years ago, I was just a dentist working in family dental practices. And I wouldn't have imagined that I'll be able to speak at Victoria Park Corporate Breakfast, or here with all of you guys, or speaking at big conferences. Never did I imagine that someone who came number one all the time, I actually was first among my cousins to get married as well, but I was first to also get divorced. And that was definitely not on the cards as a Christian Asian woman. But never did I imagine that I would be able to find love again as well, and to be able to trust someone else again. And I think God really had a great plan, and reminded me of, his words when I actually met Nick, my good husband at the back there. Uh, I actually really struggled with whether or not to tell him my story before we started dating. But when I actually did decide to be courageous and share with him, he told me it's actually not baggage, it's actually what made you who you are. And we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. So yeah, the hard times that we have is not something that we need to be ashamed of, or to hide, or to not be able to share with us, but it's actually what made us better as a person, and we want to overcome that and be able to share it with others as well. And never did I imagine that 3 months after I was released from the psych ward, I actually ended up on a trip with Richard Branson through Virgin Unite in South Africa. And I got to meet amazing people like Nelson Mandela's wife. And had major imposter syndrome on that trip. But that's actually also when I realized that God had a better plan for me. And people often ask me, what did I learn from that trip? It must be something amazing from Nelson Mandela's wife or Gracia Michelle. But actually, I often speak about this story, that these young African business students that we were actually there to help, because it was also a volunteer trip where we got to mentor young entrepreneurs and support local charities. They were actually so energetic and joyful when we visited the institute that they were studying at. And they told us that we are not PDIs, we are CEOs, because in the organizations, they often call them previously disadvantaged individuals, where they take them out of poverty and give them a business degree so that they can help their family. They're actually CEOs because they're currently exposed to opportunities. So are you a CEO? And what opportunities are you currently exposed to? And do you have hope for your future that you can share with other people as well? God actually tells us that he came so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. And what does more abundantly actually look like? It's actually about having more than enough. More than enough, not just finances, resources, but more than enough talents. And it's all about actually having more than enough so you can overflow and share with others. So last year, me and Nick and our 5-month-old baby at the time, we actually took 15 dentists to volunteer in Thailand. And this was a very God moment as well. I had never been to Thailand before, and I wasn't planning to really lead the trip in particular. But I was actually looking for a way to help some friends who had orphanages in Thailand. And I just put it out on a forum that I was looking for people who have dental volunteer services in Thailand. And I ended up collaborating with that organization and then bringing 15 dentists along. And we saw 440 patients in 2.5 days. But all the people that came with us, actually, a lot of them weren't Christian, but they realized that that trip really changed their lives and made them feel inspired to continue to do dentistry. And we really make a life by what we give. we might make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And we want to actually be light of the world. So everything that we do, whether it's in the Christian context or not, is about shining for God and actually striving for excellence so that we can actually be a great witness in front of man and in front of God as well. And I'm really grateful now when I actually get to speak on stages, and I actually usually don't quote as many Bible verses, but I quote enough that I have been on Christian radio stations because people from 96.5 or Vision radio station, they hear it and they go, oh, she's a Christian. So I'm really blessed that before I was actually serving as an evangelist in the church plant, but now I actually get to evangelize every day when I speak to people. And not only that, in my dental workplaces as well, I'm very open that I am a Christian. I love to be able to show that I am a witness through what I do, no matter my role, and that people actually know that they can come to me and trust me, and I'm a good witness for God. So I actually this year I also wanted to offer opportunities to work with people one-on-one, because I've been speaking on a lot of stages in the last 2 years, but I want to actually help people put that GRACE acronym into practice. So if you know people who might benefit from speaking to me, please do introduce us. And I wanted to help them shine by helping them implement that value of grace, but actually practically putting it into how do we define success, and how can we map out their lives, and building habits for resilience, having identity and a purpose, and actually nurturing the right connections in their life, and to elevate and grow alongside people, alongside these connections as well. So yeah, this is something that I think God has put on my heart, because often when I come off stages, people come up to me and ask me for opportunities to mentor or to work with me. So that's something that I want to try doing, and I'd like to offer people at least one sort of coaching session for free first, to see if I can make an impact on their life. So if you know professionals or yourself or leaders who want to turn challenges into opportunities and build resilience and discover their purpose and thrive with confidence and joy, please feel free to scan the QR code, or you can find it on my website as well, Dr. Grace Sha. And we've got a link there that my lovely husband has put up. And I also, you can also find it on my link tree as well there. And I've got some free resources. I wrote an article for Christian Medical and Dental Association in their magazine that's free to download there, about healthcare with care without burnout. And I break down the GRACE acronym a little bit more. And I've done a few workplace workshops as well, where I utilize the love languages, but in terms of how can you interact with people in your workplaces using that. So feel free to go and download that guide as well there. So I just wanted to finish off by sharing with you my definition of success now. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to endure the betrayal of false friends, and to appreciate beauty and find the best in others, to leave the world just a little bit better, and to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. Thank you.
Grace, so your build up towards being overworked was that when you were taken into the mental hospital? Was that the build up? Oh, sorry.
So I think I was feeling mildly burnt out already for quite a long time. And I was actually looking to, instead of realizing what that was and correctly diagnosing it, because the definition of burnout by the WHO that I showed you actually didn't come out until 2019. And that was actually the year that my life blew up. So maybe if that came out a bit earlier, it would have been correctly diagnosed. But instead, when I was, behaving slightly out of character and looking for other ways to fulfill me, or being frustrated at people that I normally wouldn't be frustrated with, or feeling like other people aren't pulling their weight, serving in church, that was wrongly diagnosed as high functioning bipolar. And that's why, I got ambushed at home. And because I'm a healthcare professional, they actually take it quite seriously in the mental health system when your closest people actually say you're behaving out of character. But that was overturned through the mental health tribunal, which is actually usually reserved for people with criminal records and things like that to overturn diagnoses. So I was actually transferred to other teams, and then they found that I was reacting badly to a bad situation, basically. That was the diagnosis. And so it did affect my work because the dental board also takes that very seriously. So I had to go through a 1-year process actually to be monitored and to make sure that I was okay to work. But I'm very grateful because the Dental Association actually helped me reduce the monitoring time. And now I'm actually sitting on the Dental Association board in Queensland. So yeah, so lots to be grateful for. And I had colleagues that still offered me work opportunities. And I'm still working 1 day a week at one of the practices where my friend actually employed me and was happy to write letters if it needed to be. So yeah, I think that's why it's important for us to actually define things like burnout, or when people are just experiencing struggles. Sometimes you just need to actually listen to them and think about their situation. Maybe they're frustrated because there is a frustrating situation, or they're sad because there's something to really grieve about. It might not necessarily be depression or something that you have to define in, the mental health diagnoses. Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about, I guess, sort of an individual perspective of burnout. What's your thoughts about burnout to abundance, which is sort of part of your business in the culture for organisations? What do leaders need to do in that area?
Yeah.
And what's your experience of that?
Yeah, so I think burnout like the prevention of burnout, I believe, needs to come from both sides. And I think currently there is a bit more of a skew in looking to organizations and leaders to do things about that. And I have ran workplace workshops where that's why my company is called B2A Culture, actually, so that people can have a better culture in their workplace, positive workplace culture. And I actually run like workshops where people can connect better as a team and actually communicate better, being able to actually a lot of issues or in workplaces, people actually stay in workplaces because of the connection and because they enjoy doing what they're doing and enjoy the people that they're working with. So I think those are really key, as well as, systems and managing the business better. But why I think actually every individual need to be aware of burnout prevention is because a lot of it is in ourselves as well. Because even if you are in a workplace that might not be perfect, um, ownership of whether or not we actually show gratitude and learn how to recharge and learn how to say no, or learn how to change and learn how to be kind to other people. That's on us as individuals. So I think everyone has an obligation actually to care for themselves, and it doesn't matter whether you're a leader or not. I think leadership is shared. We're always actually influencing other people and being a leader in our networks and being someone who cares for others or lead others. You're either leading someone away from good or towards good, right, in your life, no matter what role you're in. So I think that's everyone's responsibility to be able to educate themselves and self-care so that they can be a great influence on their team and where they are.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really great. Let's give her a big hand. I know that as you were going through some of the points in regards to burnout and all of those things, and the stresses of life, was there anybody else that thought, oh, maybe I've gone through times of burnout and not realised? Oh, just me? Okay, that's fine. So anyway, I would like to, in acknowledgement, Grace, an acknowledgement and thank you. I'd like to ask Dwayne if he would please come and make a presentation to you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Grace. Actually, I feel I should pray for your husband, Nick. Um, Trying to keep up with your energy would wear me out. But I think as business people, we can all relate to two things. One is we all suffer from stress and burnout, and also trying to get customers to pay is like pulling teeth. So I think we all have some empathy for you. So on behalf of CBN, we just want to thank you. Thank you for your energy and thank you for all that you do.